Welcome to Zombie Science, the show where we dive into the science behind the universe of Treyarch Zombies. My name is Exotic Man Dancer, and I have always been a member of the Zombies community since day one, World at War, Knockdown Toten, the day that it was found out about. I've loved zombies since the beginning, and I've always tried to be an active member of the community. Never really made an attempt at making videos, though, simply because other people always had it covered, and I felt more I could have a role in the community just by commenting things that maybe I found and helping find certain things, and truly it came to be that way. My first find that I remember was in Black Ops. I was, I believe, the first or one of the first, the day of an Ascension, to find the moon papers on the ground of Ascension, and I had conspired that, hey, maybe Moon is going to be one of the DLC maps, and boy, that came true. So that was probably one of my proudest finds. I helped find steps in Transit, Revelations, and just kind of, Buried as well was another big one that I tried helping with. But I've always just tried to stay active into the community, and I love zombies very, very much. But I felt like I needed to make my voice heard in some way, shape, or form that other people weren't really covering. And they kind of touched on it a little bit in their other videos, but never too in depth. And it doesn't have to do with storyline, because there's a lot of people doing great covering storyline coverage and theories and, just possibilities within it, as well as gameplay people, those crazy mother flippers who get to like round 200 and then the game crashes because it just can't take how good they are at it. I've always wanted to dive into the science of zombies, the breakdown of pretty much every aspect of it, and I've always wanted to know how it all works. And for the most part, it's hard to explain because there's a lot of variables in the game that are hard to bring into our real-life existence. However, I think I can do a good job. So today I'm going to start by talking about 115 and the zombies. So in this episode, like I said, we're going to be covering 115, and we're going to be covering zombies and essentially how we can kind of scientifically break this down, at least in a general format. So I like to start with each episode being 5 points, and then me kind of talking about them, and then maybe going a little bit into depth as to just some other general factors that might play into the science behind these things. So let's talk about 115. The first point, 115 can be made into a solid, liquid, or gas. We see this because it's a solid when you mine it. We see it in the rocks, just like iron ore. It's chunks of rock that kind of have, the weird part is it has ancient carvings on almost every rock, rather than just being a sort of clumpy piece of rock. It almost was meant to be found, so that's really interesting to note. But it's solid in that factor. It's liquid in origins that we see probably the most prevalent, in that, Maxis made them for the power converters so that you could power each generator station, and it can be made into the gas we see through various wonder weapons that we've used. So we know that this matter can be very manipulatable and kind of universal, and it doesn't seem to rely too heavily on the temperature to determine that factor. So that's really interesting. The next point is that the atomic count and charge is in constant compression and decompression. The reason why I say this is because the only way that it can really affect space and time as much as it does is by having a great influence on space and time, which the only way to do that is to be really dense or ultra non-dense, if that's really a scientific way to put that. But basically, the compression and decompression probably happen at a speed that's unfathomable, which can allow for rips in space, can allow for relativity issues, time issues, and we see that too constantly in this element's usage. So it's really interesting to note that. The third point, all atoms give off an interdimensional wave that travels the same speed as radio waves, but can be accessed through other fractures. So as we know, radio waves, as fast as they are more so known for their prevalence and ability to travel long distances without dissipating too much. We could probably send a radio wave far beyond our solar system, it would just take forever to reach there. However, what's amazing is since we have all these fractures that have occurred since time travel has become possible through 935's research, we can start to assume that this element has the ability to access those fractures, and thus kind of gives it the ability to be omnipotent in where you find it. Fourth point, there's a suppressant called anti-115, which can weaken 115's omnipotent nature. We see this in Moon because he gets the rock, which is anti-115 from Shangri-La, and that's what helps him open up the pyramid, the MPD. And the only really way to do that is to weaken 115 and its ability. So I'm assuming, since we covered that it's, compressing and decompressing very rapidly, and it has these radio-like waves coming off of it, it suppresses those and makes it to where the omnipotent nature of the element is not as powerful. The fifth and final point is that it is only radioactive by contact. There are some instances where this is radioactive just by being around it, such as in Shadows of Evil, where the spores and the weird plant things start growing there, and Morgue City, and people start getting infected. But I do believe that 115, pure 115, untampered with, is only really radioactive when you touch it. We notice this with the MPD and many of the rocks when they're being worked with directly by the scientists, because when contact is made, that's when they start losing a lot of their psyche and their sanity. So that's really interesting to point out. So, moving on from those 5 points, in order to try and understand the zombies, we must try to define element 115 as best as possible. We know that the element is a great power source as seen in Origins, a great weapon, a great communicative device. As well, 115 is the ability to channel energy from the aether and manipulate matter as we know it. 115 is truly a mysterious element, and that it is very clear that it was not part of our universe to begin with. We know this because of the significance of the Crazy Place, which I love the Crazy Place, and we'll save that for another episode. But in summation, 115 is the ability to do things beyond science, which makes this hard to define, but we're trying to do our best here. In terms of human affection, 115 can interfere with a live person's well-being by making them hear voices, experience memory loss, and strengthen them in various ways, usually physically. The unfortunate truth about 115 is that it gives the player more power, but it takes memory away as you continue to use it. This aspect cannot clearly be defined by science, but string theory more so. As we know, 115 can channel other universes and the aether, which also is enough to create fractures in the universe. If you are able to become aware of other fractures or the power that separates them, it truly is a world of suffering due to humans' incapability to perceive more than they can. This is probably a good reason why the characters that we play as always seem to be suffering, because they're experiencing time loops, since they can't perceive everything at the same time. Especially since we only perceive time as moving forward rather than its entirety. The power was never meant for humans, and this is why it has such repercussions to its use. As far as the dead go, we can more so define the science behind the possibilities here. One of our closest encounters with a real zombie in recent history is probably the man who ate the face off of another man after taking bath salts. Though this drug affects people differently, it's the closest we have seen to the symptoms of a live zombie and how collective they are. This is due to the mephedrone, a synthetic stimulant, or this word that I'm about to butcher, which is methylphenidate, which is a psychoactive drug. Other instances can be slightly captured in rabies, which is infectious and inflames the brain, or necrosis, which gives skin the look of zombies. The way in which 115 acts most similar to real-life instances in zombies is by a fungi known as genus Ophiocordyceps. This was used really strongly in The Last of Us, which takes over the bodies of carpenter ants and can actually control them by stimulating the basic motor functions, even though the ant is dead. However, with 115, instead of a fungus effect, we get a glowing effect from the eyes. This could act in a similar way, since this fungus sprouts from the corpse of the ant's head and body. Instead of a fungus spread, though, we witness either the lack of a cornea, iris, and pupil in the eye to the point of complete clarity, or the removal of the eyes entirely. This would mean that 115 takes control of the basic motor functions as well, since the host is dead and feels no pain when damaged. Especially for the zombies to hit as hard as they do, they would have to be some serious damage caused to themselves as well. However, we can easily assume that when someone controls the zombies from the MPD, they are only commanding rather than controlling the zombies, for humans do not have the conscious capability to perceive the actions of each individual zombie. So from now on, let's call it commanding rather than controlling. However, this aspect of 115's communicative nature is interesting in that it acts like a radio tower broadcasting signals to zombies. Since we know that 115 has the ability to transfer, alter, and eliminate matter, 115 is capable of really doing anything. The MPD acts as a host radio tower which sends the signals out, but it seems to have minimal ability in affecting matter outside of itself. It truly is interesting to try and dive in and scientifically debunk what 115 is, but we can only do so much since, well, it's not real. But I feel like I've done a fairly decent job of kind of breaking down the general laws of how the atoms work and kind of the manipulation that is used within the element to bleed into space and time. Like I said, this element was never meant for our universe, and how it got here in the storyline is truly a mystery. And that is why it has so many repercussions and it affects space-time so drastically. I'm Exotic Man Dancer, and if you enjoyed this episode, please stay tuned. I'm going to be posting a lot more of these. The next episode, we're going to dive into the science behind points, power drops, wall weapons, and mystery box. And after that, we're going to go into one of my favorite topics to talk about, which is the perks and how each of them individually affect you. So stay tuned for that. I'm Exotic Man Dancer again. Thanks for watching.